renowned scholar, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson's talk. So with that positive energy, I bring greetings to everyone. As mentioned, my name is John Holloway, Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I'm so pleased and happy you're here tonight to help us celebrate and support Black history. Black History Month is an annual celebration of cultural heritage where we honor the many contributions that African Americans have made to our country. We are also reminded about the sacrifices and the ongoing struggles for social and racial justice that African Americans continue to overcome daily. At this time, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our Emory and Henry community, our students, staff, faculty, and alumni. And a very special welcome to our friends from Southwest Virginia Community College. Southwest Community College has partnered with Emory and Henry for tonight's program, and we are partnering next month for our Women's History Celebration. I reached out to President Wright to seek his involvement, and he never hesitated. He said, "John, let's make this happen." Without the support of Southwest, tonight's program would not be possible. This partnership in our region makes sense, and this will not be our last event. In fact, we have named, as Carly mentioned, this partnership a bridge to change, the new freedom movement in Southwest Virginia. Look out for additional programs and exciting endeavors. Collectively, both institutions bring broad dreams and high aspirations of what we can offer the region surrounding issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So welcome. Welcome to Southwest students, staff, faculty, and alumni members. And last but not least, I want to welcome Emory and Henry's and Southwest Virginia Community College's community members and faithful friends. Your continued presence is appreciated. Again, I thank you all for coming out tonight and supporting this event. The Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion has an incredible month of inspiring programming, which is an outcome of our campus-wide Black History Planning Committee. We issued a clarion call and extended invitations, and the response was amazing. Faculty, staff, and students assembled an impressive list of offerings. This effort was under the leadership of Carly Blaylock, DEI's Special Projects Coordinator. Thank you, Carly. I know everyone is looking forward to a dynamic talk this evening, so I'll step aside now, but first, I have the honor of introducing the president of Emory Henry College, Dr. John W. Wells, and then the president of Southwest Virginia Community College, Dr. Tommy Wright. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Vice President Holloway, for those words of welcome. What an honor it is for me to welcome everyone to this special event this evening. I'm happy to say that with our partner institution, Southwest Virginia Community College, our most important institutional relationships that Emory and Henry has, anticipate an evening that will cause reflection and much needed discussion. We know that this isn't just another Lyceum event to kick off Black History celebration at Emory and Henry. For many reasons, this year feels quite different. As we continue to move through a moment in American history that requires us to grapple with the deeply unjust realities of the past, while imagining a more equitable and inclusive future, we must pause to consider what we are called to do in this present moment. How will we lend our voices, our actions, and our will to employ what levers of power we can to make progress in achieving a better day? Part of our task is an intellectual one, and Dr. Dyson is here to help us realize what our contributions can be. Much of what we can do in the present moment is practical and based on measurable outcomes. During this Black History Celebration time at Emory and Henry College, we are hearing the stories of people who have grappled with the very real obstacles of lingering structures of power, but who nevertheless found ways to challenge those structures and to encourage the moral imagination in others. This evening will be part of that time of reflection and determination to move our region to a better and more equitable place. I'm especially honored that we have Michael Eric Dyson here with us this evening. I have followed Michael Eric Dyson's career for literally my entire adult life. Mm-hmm. He was just ahead of me at the undergraduate alma mater that he and I share. So I was always interested in the very real and positive legacy he was creating from a very early time in life. As someone who walked in hallways only a few years after Dr. Dyson had walked them, I can testify that he found his voice early in life and has been making an impact ever since. Since those early days in Mossy Creek, Dr. Dyson has emerged as one of our most eloquent voices among the nation's public intellectuals, and Emory and Henry is honored to have him here. And I look forward with great anticipation to tonight's lecture. And as Vice President Holloway has said, I look forward to many more opportunities of partnership with our friends at Southwest Virginia Community College who share the commitment for a more just and equitable time amongst us. So welcome to everyone.
Thanks, Dr. Wells. I also want to say thanks to Dr. John Holloway for reaching out to me. As he said, it was a welcome conversation, a welcome call, sort of a blessing in disguise as we at Southwest Virginia Community College were hoping to travel down a road that we haven't been in a while, a road that would allow us to celebrate Black History Month and many other endeavors in the path of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So again, thanks to Dr. Holloway and thanks to Dr. Wells, who I've enjoyed many conversations with him. And as we've talked about the efforts that we both need to make, we both want to make in the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion, this was a welcome partnership. As has been said, Carly Blaylock, she's really the glue that is holding everything together. I'm certain she is the boots on the ground, and much appreciation to Carly for her assistance. And to Reverend Bowers, we know that there's so much work to do and more hands make light work. So thanks to her as well. And then lastly, thanks to, as has been mentioned, the Emory and Henry students, faculty, staff, as well as the Southwest Virginia Community College students, faculty, and staff. Sam Cooke said, it's been a long time coming, but I know a change is going to come. Oh, yes, it will. I believe these words. I believe if we dedicate ourselves to the hard work, the difficult conversations, the harsh reality that change is needed, then we will be able to realize the words of these necessary changes. I believe Southwest Virginia Community College is ready to embrace this work, these conversations, and recognizes that we can and must do all we can to be a bridge to change. And I look forward to this partnership and all that we can accomplish in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you all for your remarks. And I wanted to take just a point of privilege and to thank Marcia for all of her labor in making this happen and staying connected over the time. And I told her I wanted to see her. So I hope I get to see you on Zoom. But it's my pleasure to introduce Michael Eric Dyson, and I'm going to read some information. Most of you are probably familiar with him and his work, but I will read this, and then after that, we will be honored to hear wonderful words of wisdom. Michael Eric Dyson is one of the nation's most renowned professors, gifted writers, inspiring preachers, knowledgeable lecturers, and riveting media personalities. As a professor who earned a PhD in religion from Princeton University, Dyson has taught at some of the nation's most distinguished universities, including Brown, UNC Chapel Hill, Columbia, DePaul, the University of Pennsylvania, and Georgetown University. He is currently the Distinguished University Professor of African American and Diaspora Studies, College of Arts and Science at Centennial, and the Centennial Professor at Vanderbilt University. As a writer of more than 20 books, New York Times bestseller, The Black Presidency, Barack Obama, and the Politics of Race in America, and Tears We Cannot Stop, a sermon to white America, that was called by the New York Times one of the most frank and searing discussions on race, a deeply serious, urgent book, which should take its place in the tradition of Baldwin's The Fire Next Time and King's Why Can't We Wait? His latest book, Long Time Coming, Reckoning with Race in America, published December 2020, was heralded as Amazon's best-selling book for 2020. Dyson has lectured across the country and around the world in many of the best colleges and universities and in public theaters and auditoriums, and for many corporations and unions. He has also served for the last 30 years as a media commentator and host on every major radio and television show, from NPR's Morning Edition, The Takeaway, and Fresh Air and Terry Gross, the television's Meet the Press, Face the Nation, Today Show, Good Morning America, and Real Time with Bill Maher. As the political analysis on NBC and CNN, and Fox News. We welcome you, Reverend Dr. Dyson, to Emory and Henry and Southwest Virginia College, time together. And we say in our tradition, have your way.
Thank you so very kindly, Sister Bowers, for that very gracious introduction. And to President Wells, thank you, my friend, for that very gracious invitation and warm up, so to speak, being from the same college and sharing time, if not at the same time, at least in those hallways that fundamentally shaped us. And so an honor to be here. President Wright as well, for for the gracious convergence of schools and opportunities, and all of the good people here, Brother Holloway, all the wonderful brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen who are gathered here. Ms. Blaylock, looking forward to a conversation with you later as well. If I were to reflect on this theme of the future of the freedom struggle, the future of the freedom movement, the future of our quest for freedom, it is easily acknowledged that the necessity of freedom impels us to continually be in quest of and in search for a remarkable and wonderful possibility, opportunity to realize our deepest ambitions. The fact that freedom continues to be a future attainment, a future goal, a future aspiration, compels us to move forward in such a fundamental way as to make certain that our realization of that freedom is constantly evolving, constantly dynamic, never a be-all and end-all situation, never a finally settled circumstance. So when we talk about freedom as an ideal, as a noble aspiration, as a vision that compelled the founding fathers and mothers and brothers to found a nation, to create the anatomy of their democratic, small d, intuition and imagination, to found and shape a nation that could reflect the profound preoccupation with freedom as its fundamental characteristic of identity. Why is that important? That is important because so many other nations exist merely to realize the ambition of the elite in a hierarchy, in a plutocracy, in a monarchy, or in other forms of authoritarian government, where the realization of the ambition of the dictator, of the single-minded, singularly focused ruler within a dominant empire for the purposes of self-realization or the realization of the ambitions, goals, and desires of a very few elites at the top of the pyramid or the hierarchy. And yet the noble vision of freedom that characterizes America ideally sets us in motion toward the realization of our goals of freedom for everybody. That the nation itself is compelled and impelled forward, motivated, inspired by the belief that freedom would be both the theme of our citizenship, the goal toward which we moved, and the means by which we achieved those emancipatory and liberating ideas. So the nation writ large, against the canvas of human history, against the canvas of our struggling colonies, defining themselves over against the surrounding and marauding, in some cases, forces of a British culture against which they eventually struck out, against which they defined themselves, in contrast to the forms of government that restricted the agency and mobility of what would become the United States of America, and at the same time, from within, even as the nation is forming itself, even as the nation founds itself, it discovers internal dimensions of contradiction and conflict. That even as the eloquent words and the majestic phrases of the Declaration of Independence are being crafted, as the Constitution is being created, as the Magna Carta, if you will, of American political life is being articulated, as the Federalist Papers are being drawn up, as men and women in the embrace of the first flush of freedom began to articulate the noble ideals that will ground the nation from within. The echo, the reminder that America has not been completely free, because all men doesn't include women as a group, doesn't include Africans in America, enchained at the very moment of the birth of the nation. That this great nation founded, believing itself to be unique. Tocqueville came in the 1800s, in the middle of them, suggesting that American was an exceptional nation, an exceptional character, characterized this particular union of human beings, this particular union of colonies. And yet at the same time, that exceptionalism, that line extracted from de Tocqueville, reminds me of what Jay-Z said in fighting with Nas at that time. You made it a hot line, I made it a hot song. So de Tocqueville dropped it as a line in his mixtape on American culture, but America seized it as a means of articulating its album of social conscience, making an entire nation premised upon an observation of a French observer. Although you read the newspapers today, the New York Times says that the French, from Emmanuel Macron himself, not chercher la femme, chercher la border, to prevent the invasion of American conceptions of race, gender, and culture from undermining French society. Ain't that something? We'll have to call upon the Francophone and African-inspired French-speaking intellectuals will have to call upon Frantz Fanon to remind them that these ideals are not simply invasions of American intellectual life, but they have been created within the context and womb of French society because they have denied the legitimate voices of those they ruled out as not genuinely French within the parameters of their colonial hegemony, not as dominant as British culture, where they could say the sun never set on the British Empire because they own so much, but French colonies not allowing the legitimate citizenship of those Francophone countries, those French-speaking African colonies, colonized by France, to speak up. So we would remind President Macron of that. Or we could be flippant and say, hey, this is just payback for y'all sending Derrida and Foucault over here. And so when we think about defining America and defining freedom as the characteristic moment of this nation, we see from the very beginning there was contradiction and conflict. John Locke and conceptions of liberalism would suggest that America ultimately, the nation as it was founded then, rests upon land owning, property owning white men. And many others were blocked out. Women wouldn't gain the franchise till 100 and some odd years later. More than that, African slaves, enslaved African people, citizens not, but subjects of the state, wouldn't really gain full citizenship and franchise, technically before white women to be certain, but en masse, not until 1965, where most Black people gathered in the South permitted the opportunity to exercise their franchise to vote. And so the beginning of the nation in these decidedly contradictory moments, the full embrace of freedom, the articulation of the noble ideals of American democracy, the possibility that this nation would uniquely embody a belief that they could open their doors and borders to all, that freedom would be its rallying cry, and yet at the same time enslaving human beings. Yes, it is true, Thomas Jefferson had struck from the Declaration of Independence a rather tart rebuke to those who owned human beings as slaves, and yet so did he. And so it's complicated. If the founding fathers were on Facebook and they would express their beliefs, they would say it's complicated. And so, that being the backdrop, let us remember the freedom struggle that came to this nation as a result of an internal civil war that continues to be prosecuted. If we look at the television and we look at senators from the South and politicians from the South who continue to wage war in the name of a resentment against having been bested by the forces of the North. They lost the war, but they won the battle of interpretation. Erecting statues. Those statues are not from 1850, not from 1840. For the most part, they're from 1950 and 60, when the Black freedom struggle in Mississippi and in Georgia and in Alabama began. That's when most of those statues were erected. So for those who think this is hoary ancient history, deeply entombed into the collective unconscious of the American imagination, think again, dog. It's really recent. And the point of it was to reinforce the fundamental subordination of Black people to a dominant white supremacist ethic. And so when we talk about the freedom of the future of the freedom movement, we derive from those great ideals that those great founding fathers, yes, they owned human beings. Yes, they did some other stuff that is not savory. But the great proposition of America as a nation, as an ideal, as an experiment, continues to entrance us, continues to enchant us, and pulls us forward. So the Civil War, brother against brother, father against son and daughter, kinfolk against kinfolk, in the bitter schism in American society that divided this nation. Some would say, no, it was not about the ownership of slaves, it was about states' rights. The state's right to do what? Oh, I see. So you just playing. Quit playing. You just manipulating linguistic paraphernalia. You saying the same thing. And so that Civil War has been matched by a second monumental effort at freedom when Martin Luther King Jr. rose up from the South, a Negro child born in 1929, January 15th, in Atlanta, Georgia. A city too busy to hate, but they forgot to live up to the credo of the city. The motto was muffled beneath the murderous temptation to snuff out Black life, along with the rest of the South. Dr. King, going to college at 15, graduated at 19, going to seminary, going on up north, seminary in Pennsylvania, then graduate school in Boston, then coming back down to Montgomery, Alabama, then moving back to Atlanta, Georgia. And so this son of the South, along with thousands of others, noble souls, courageous hearts and minds, John Lewis, Ella Baker, Septima Clark, Joanne Robinson, Angela Davis, James Baldwin, A. Philip Randolph, Bayard Rustin, Mary Church Terrell, Nannie Helen Burroughs, these great souls, Fannie Lou Hamer, these great spirits rose up to declare the necessity of freedom in our own time. The Montgomery Bus Boycott with Martin Luther King Jr. and the great Rosa Parks, testing the durability of the American dream, testing the power of American beliefs to ground our conception of e pluribus unum, out of many one. What many are we referring to? All many's? All folk, all peoples, all religions, all regions, all geographies, all races? And so, my brothers and sisters, in a fundamental way, the quest for freedom that compelled this nation to exist, that contradicted its own impulse to freedom with its own practices, leading to a civil war, and then the argument in the 1960s for Black freedom in this country by a host of noble souls who were committed to the fundamental transformation of American society, mostly nonviolently, embracing the beautiful ideals of America. Martin Luther King Jr. standing up in 1963, August 28th, the 8th anniversary of the death of Emmett Till, a 14-year-old Black boy from Chicago who had gone down to Money, Mississippi to visit his relatives, and then was apprehended in the middle of the night by two white men who said he had the unabashed temerity to whistle at one of their wives, or to engage in what was termed reckless eyeballing, looking at a white woman, having sexual desire as the motive, ostensibly, and yet Carolyn Bryant, at 83 years old, a few years ago, said she made it all up. It was a lie. And yet, because of this lie, this young man was beaten badly, shot a 70-pound cotton gin fan tied around his neck and tossed into the Tallahatchie River. And when his body was extracted, his mother said, "We will not have a closed casket funeral. I want America to see the disfiguring impact of white supremacy on the Black body." What were Black people after? Freedom. Freedom that had been granted to most citizens as a measure of existence. White citizens. But Black citizens had it denied to them as a matter of course. Dying for this country, shedding blood for this country, going to foreign theaters to die in war for this country. And some of those men and women, when they returned home, were treated with shame. Some of those Black men who stood proudly on train platforms with their uniforms were lynched because they had the gall to wear an American uniform. And there were, of course, internal divisions. Martin Luther King Jr., though young himself, dying at 39, he didn't reach 40. SNCC beneath him. Southern Christian Leadership was his organization, SCLC. Beneath him, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. As a younger generation, Diane Nash, John Lewis, James Bevel, Julian Bond, Marion Barry. Yep, that Marion Barry. And a host of other figures. And the young people were beefing with the older people. You know how it is, young people. You try to play Patrick Mahomes, but Tom Brady whips you. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? Oh, okay. Show them what an old man will do, son. And so they're clowning Dr. King, the Lord. They call him the Lord behind his back. They clowned him because he liked to wear silk pajamas. The man was getting threatened 365 days of his life every year. He was being besmirched. He was being assaulted. He was being slapped. He was being stabbed. He was being threatened. If he wanted some silk pajamas, what up? Come on, y'all. But there were tensions the way there are now between Black Lives Matter. Oh my God, Jiminy Cricket, what are they doing? But like SNCC, they said, we ain't got one leader, we have multiple leaders. We're not leaderless, we are leaderful. Unlike the Black church with its hierarchy, the preacher in charge, bishop in charge, the head man in charge, man emphasized here. The women who constitute the Black church, 75% of them, they are subordinate to men. So the Black church arguing against racial apartheid is practicing gender apartheid simultaneously. Man, it's Wednesday night. It's Wednesday night. I'm on prayer meeting night. You can see why I ain't got no church. You can see why I'm a Baptist preacher, but I ain't got no church. You understand what it is. And so there were tensions internally, but the collective enterprise of freedom was articulated. And now here we are, 2021. Last year, George Floyd murdered before our very eyes. A Black man who was begging to breathe. People say, why did white folk get involved? Why did white folk flood those streets? I think one of the reasons is we were already in a pandemic. And being in a pandemic, we were looking at our computers. We were looking at our screens. We were looking at our Androids and our iPhones and our iPads. Here it was 2 weeks before the pandemic. We were probably warning our kids, get off the damn telephone, will you? Stop looking at Instagram. Trying to sound like an old fogey. Stop looking at the Twitter and pay attention to each other. And now here we are in the pandemic. We find the very cast off technological means that we said before interrupted the possibility of human community, facilitating it. We now depend upon these screens to have remote intimacy, to have connection. Some of us look at our therapists on a screen. Some of us look at our doctors on a screen. Some of us, tragically, say goodbye to our loved ones on a screen. So the technology has facilitated a kind of remote intimacy. And I think when those images of Mr. Floyd went across our screens, we were already tuned in. We were already sympathetic to the difficulties of COVID. You mean during COVID, they're still beating Black people down? The police are still brutalizing Black bodies in the midst of a pandemic? And so many white people flooded the streets, swelled the numbers to the greatest protest this nation has ever seen for social justice in America. And then, of course, Breonna Taylor is murdered in her own home, and that story came to the fore by the police. Ahmaud Arbery is hunted down like an animal on the streets of Georgia by white racist vigilantes. And mind you, all of this is situated in the presidency of a man who was making compact, at least implicitly, with white supremacists, with white nationalists as his advisor, with white supremacy ever floating in the atmosphere. And so when you look at the convergence of these racial catastrophes, the cataclysmic eruption of racial resistance and the determination to reckon with race in America, here we are at this moment of reckoning. How are we to do it? What is the future of the freedom movement for not only 2020 with George Floyd and the biggest protest in the history of this nation? What do we do about January 6, 2021? Look at those 3 Tuesdays in January: insurrection, inauguration, and impeachment. This is not America, so many people said. Others said it's always been America. You just ain't been paying attention. We know that if those were Black people expressing their right to protest at the Capitol, that they may have well been shot. They would surely have been arrested en masse. No selfies being taken. Even when there were Black Lives Matter protests in the summer of 2020, huge police presence, law enforcement surrounding them as if they were fundamentally anti-American bigots. And here, insurrectionists, those who are fundamentally disloyal to the nation. Where's all the Blue Lives Matter discourse now? When police people were being assaulted, when law enforcement was being deprived of its right to safety, being pummeled with unconscionable assault by ostensible patriots of America. And yet, these people waving the banner of bigotry, that horrible and persistent inequality that is betokened in the flag of the Confederacy, that refusal to accept the fact that we are essentially unified as a nation at our best, and that the South lost the war for good reason, that the principles and practices of prejudice promote a nation that can never realize its best ideals and its more noble aspirations. And so the havoc that was wrought, the horror that was unleashed, the terror that was concentrated there, in the name of American citizenship, but contradicting it, not in the name of true democracy, fomented by a president who refused to acknowledge his defeat and who sparked the insurrection by using the most hallowed hall in American history, the Oval Office, as the avatar of anti-democratic beliefs. This is the Manchurian president on steroids. As I end then, the future of the freedom movement depends upon us appealing to the great and grand ideals that motivated the founding fathers and the refounding fathers and mothers and brothers in the 1960s to make this nation the best that it could be by embracing the wide swath of American identity, by embracing all citizens to participate in the making and remaking of the American nation. Number two, that freedom as conceived as the ability to best realize the principles and ideals of the nation must recognize that we must forever ratify our beliefs, that they're not just taken once at a time and our commitment to them is safe and steady. It is a constant reaffirmation of the necessity of social justice, of American identity, of American democracy. Does not the Capitol remind us that we must hold precious those ideals and must re-articulate them time and again so that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren will inherit a nation where they must ratify and reassert and reaffirm those principles because they are not once and for all given. Like religious conversion, they demand time and again to yield to the greater spirit. And then finally, that freedom itself, the notion of it must be expanded. And that means as we fight for freedom, we fight for everybody's freedom. Not just the folk we like, not just the folk who fall in line with our own ideology. So it's about race, but also class, about gender and also sexual orientation. I was preaching not long ago as I end in Cleveland at a black church, and a black woman came up to me. She said, "You know you're going to hell." I said, "Man, did Jesus tell you that?" Because I talked to Jesus this morning. He ain't told me nothing about I was going to hell. I said, "I guess I don't have to watch my cholesterol now." Jesus, all right, well. And she said, "No, you know why you going to hell." I said, "Why, man?" She said, "You had the nerve to preach from the pulpit that God created gay people." I said, "And you think I'm going to hell? And you're a polytheist? You think there's a God for gay people and one for straight? What do you think, God is divinely schizophrenic? What, did God take a day off? Hey, I've got Wednesday off, so whatever you do, don't ascribe that creation to me, dog. I'm just out here chilling in the ethers and the cosmic atmosphere. I need a break. It's hard creating you human beings. Is that how it goes? No. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that means gay and straight and lesbian and transgender and bisexual. That means Muslim and, Sikh and Protestant and Catholic and Baha'i, and whether you read the Bhagavad Gita, the Holy Quran, the Tao Te Ching, the art of motorcycle maintenance. That means regardless of your color or your nationality or your religion or your geography, that the future of freedom can only be protected if all of us are willing to invest in it for the rest of us, as if their bodies are ours, as if their sexual orientation is ours, as if their ideals are ours. Then, and only then, can we justly proclaim and righteously declare the motto of this nation is true and real. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. Thank you so very kind.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dyson.
Thank you.
Yes, round of applause.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that.
So we're going to do a few question and answers, and I want to go ahead and have our first question asked by one of our partners from Southwest Virginia. We're going to ask Dr. Brian Wright to ask the first question.
All right.
Thank you. Hello, Dr. Dyson. We really appreciate your time and certainly enjoyed the message. It really inspires. So the question that I have is that the great Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune once said that education is the great American adventure, that it is the world's most colossal democratic experience or experiment. And so the question is, do you still agree with what Dr. Bethune said as a precursor to the folks like Dr. King? Is it still the case? And what can we as educators do to make sure that her words ring true?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Wright. No, I do agree with her. It's critical. Education is important. That's why we fight so much to get it right. That's why miseducation is so deleterious. That's why disinformation is so destructive. That's why the lack of context to explain backdrops, backgrounds, understandings, ideas. Dadgummit, we got to have more education, not less. Better education, not worse. And it is extremely important to understand where we've come from by looking at the ideas that continue to inspire the nation, that continue to ground it, to look at the practices and the histories that either justify our pursuit of freedom or alternatively try to undercut us. And when I've mentioned Senator Hawley or Mitch McConnell or Lindsey Graham, I think this is a battle of education. It's a battle of ideas. It's a battle of whose interpretation will prevail. And we need to understand the vital importance and the critical measure of education. Those textbooks being written in Texas, you got to get better. Can't basically reduce slavery to a week and, it was kind of bad, but not that bad. And Black history is basically Martin Luther King Jr., though he was great, the greatest ever American, I contend. But we have to have a nuanced conception of history, a thicker description, as Clifford Geertz and other anthropologists would say. You got to have a more textured understanding of who we are as a nation. And that education can open minds, can open eyes, can give us a sense of the real character of this nation. And once we begin to put away the lies and do away with the deliberate mendacity that has been unleashed on this nation, education may well prove to be one of the saving gestures of our society. And teachers like you and professors and thinkers and, you know, those noble souls who teach our young people and instruct them, one of the greatest jobs that any human being could ever have. And God bless you, and please keep on doing the great work.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dyson, and God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
We have a question from one of our community members. I'm going to read it as it's written.
Mm-hmm.
The foundation of racist ideology has always been built by the elite in our country, not the foot soldiers. And the variations have been created in ways that are not nearly invisible to the public as racist at the time. For example, the war on drugs, failing schools, criminal predators, etc. Trump's racist ideology is blatant, but what do you see as our new foundations?
Yeah, it's another great question. It may not be thought of by the foot soldiers, but it's carried out at that level, unfortunately, against their own best interests, right? W.E.B. Du Bois in 1935 in his book, Black Reconstruction, talked about the psychological wages of whiteness. Hey, at least you're not a Negro. So you don't pay them good money. You continue to exploit them. The class chasm is huge. The yawning abyss between the have-gots and the have-nots ever widens. But what do you pay them in? The coin of the realm is the psychological wage of whiteness. And so the foundation now, if we look at it, if we take that argument to be true, which I think is absolutely the case, and you look at how white supremacy is being, distributed in this culture, I think the foundation of white supremacy is once again, the basis for so much that we're doing. And finally, people are starting to talk about it. You got Anderson Cooper talking about white supremacy. You got the president of the United States of America, Joe Biden, mentioning it in his inauguration speech, in his inaugural speech. I ain't never heard a president talk about white supremacy or systemic racism. Y'all correct me. Y'all at, Southwest and Emory, y'all big time, but I'm just saying, I ain't never seen it. All right. So I think, as Malcolm X talked about ending the end of white world supremacy and worldwide white supremacy, what we have to understand is that vicious ideology has been boldly and viciously re-articulated as the premise of American democratic exchange and energy, and the basis of American society. And one of the ruinous consequences of the Trump administration has been to enshrine white supremacist discourse as the basis of American democratic identity. Then he's the one who's talking about, taking away critical race theory and its lessons from the official organs of the state. Well, he did him a favor, because a lot of people go, what's that? What's critical race theory? So he probably did him a solid by doing that. But I think that white supremacy has again been articulated as the foundation of neo-racist, neo-bigoted, neo-prejudicial beliefs that continue to be re-articulated and freshly minted in the context of American society. The question is, can we oppose that through anti-racist discourse? Can we oppose the anti-blackness? And white supremacist modality of preference is anti-black belief, anti-black bodies. I mean, anti-blackness is manifest in anti-black beliefs and ideology. The black body, black belief system, black worldviews, black communities, black cultures are under assault by these anti-Black, racist, and white supremacist forces. Let's name them again, and let's figure out how to continue to fight and resist them.
Thank you, Dr. Dyson.
Thank you.
I'm going to give the next question to Corey Whited, who is the SGA president at Southwest Virginia Community College.
All right.
Good evening, Dr. Dyson and everyone in attendance. Thank you, Dr. Dyson, for your time and words of inspiration. I hope all is well with everybody. As she mentioned, my name is Corey Whited. I'm a student government president here at Southwest. And it's certainly my honor and privilege to participate in this event and represent our student body. So our question is, initiatives for diversity, equity, and inclusion should and must extend beyond the college campus into the communities, as well as with online interactions, with the increase in online courses as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. What are ways our institutions promote this initiative beyond the borders of our campus into our communities so that diversity, equity, and inclusion can replace bias, status quo advocacy, and phobic behaviors? Thank you.
Mr. President, put it down, sir. No doubt about it. You know, if you'd have been 45, we'd have had a good time. Of course, you're not old enough yet, but keep on, brother. Keep on. No, it's extremely important to let this stuff range far beyond the academy. Although I don't like it when people go like in the real world. Last time I checked, this is the real world too. I got real students. They got real names. They paying real money for a real education. So that's the real world as far as I know. But the phobias that you talked about, the prejudices that are instigated there, there's a special responsibility, I would think. Now, I'm going to sound elitist here. I know people, you know, it kills me when I see all these senators up here talking about, you elites, dude, you went to Stanford and Yale. What in the hell are you talking about? But you trying to act like you ain't one of them, right? Okay, Harley, you see I'm hollering at you. So, you know, it may sound elitist, but I think we have a special responsibility to go back to the other question about education, about that, what Dr. Wright said. We got a responsibility to educate folk, right? Not condescendingly, like, let me tell you something, you dumbass, right? That ain't the way to go about it, right? Even though you think they are. Hey, you know, what I try to do is engage people where they are. Like Jesus meeting the woman at the well. He didn't say, let me give you a theological disquisition about metanoia and transformation and conversion. He said, can I have a drink of water? I'm thirsty. All right. Then he got into a discussion about some deep theology. Once he fed the need, you know, the thirst of the spirit, and as long as he slaked that desire and engaged her where she was. And we must engage people where they are. So it is important to transform the broader culture by bringing the liberal, I don't mean liberal versus conservative, I'm talking about in the traditional sense, liberal education to bear upon the problems we have as a society and engage in the very difficult work of challenging white supremacy, social injustice, homophobia, transphobia, economic inequality, class caste systems that disrespect human beings. And then to reach out to them, to engage them, and to have complicated conversations. And in doing so, not to do it in the cancel culture way. I'm sorry, but I can't get with the cancel culture, bruh. You know, I know young people like, yes, to me, it's just a replacement for the mob. What's the difference? I don't like you. I'm going to send the mob on you. And within one day, we done canceled you. You ain't got no TV show. You ain't got no radio show. You ain't got nothing. Now, if you were a bigot and a predator and you were hurting women and stuff, I ain't got no sympathy for you. But I'm talking about if you make a mistake, like take, for instance, Morgan. Is it Morgan Wallen, the young country singer who used the N-word? Now, he shouldn't have been using the N-word. I'm not defending him. Nope, it's wrong at all times. But when I went and looked at the film, he wasn't like talking against another black person. He was doing it like, like tell these, blah, blah, blah. Now, I'm not justifying that, but dude, that's a big difference than turning to some black person and saying you N-word, right? Now, we should educate him. Let's not cancel him. Let's not kill the man. Let's have a conversation with him. Use him and he's already apologized. He knows he messed up, right? And it seems pretty sincere to me. So can we not like destroy his entire career over one mistake? Right? Let's engage people. Let's talk to them. What you did was wrong, is problematic. Fundamentally, and understand that word is one of the most one of the most hurtful in the history of the world. You're using it even in term with the NIGGA versus NIGGR, shows an intimate familiarity with certain measures of black culture, but still racially insensitive. We can say all that, but let's overcome that. Let's work on that together. Let's figure out a way to make it. But no, you're canceled. Done. Come on. A New York Times reporter, same thing, 47 years. And he was asked a question about the N-word and he repeated it. He wasn't trying to call the young lady that. He says, did you use this in a certain way? And he repeated the term. He admitted later, I should have never said it. Absolutely right. But 47 years of a career down the drain for an unintended, inadvertent mistake? This ain't Donald Trump. This ain't white supremacy being amplified by, it's ridiculous, right? This is a mistake. And unless we learn to redeem each other in mutual critique and edifying fashion, we're creating a lynch mob mentality of a cancel culture. And you might be the canceler today, but you might be the cancelee tomorrow. My Bible tells me, be careful about digging a grave for somebody. You might fall in it yourself. Right? And so we have to learn the precious principles of anti-racism, democracy, holding people to account, speaking out against the phobic obsessions of a white supremacist culture. But we got to do so in a fashion that allows people to have enough space to come to grips with their own prejudices and biases, and perhaps even racist and white supremacist thinking, hold them accountable, but offer them the opportunity to be redeemed. All right? I hope I didn't over-answer your question, sir, but that's what I would say.
Thank you, Dr. Dyson.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have time for one more?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to read this as written. Women, in particular Black women, have historically fought against structural interlocking systems of oppression, race, gender, and class. Mm-hmm. Why do you think Black women are, in the eyes of the elites, still at the bottom of the rung? Yeah,
it's a tragedy. I mean, think about it. Eligible white women voted 54% for 45. This is after grabbing it. This is after all the charges, right? Now, you see I'm against cancel culture, but dude, you got like 50 people on your ledger. I can't help you right there, bro. I mean, you had a couple, 3. All right, it's misunderstanding. I don't know what went down. You got 25, 30 women. I don't know, dog. Looks pretty rough. But after that, white women and others who said, because he deals with my pocketbook, because my bills are paid, because the economy looks pretty decent to me. Sorry if he thinks you're an N-word. Sorry if he thinks you're a hoe, a skeezer, a slut. Sorry if he can use you in a predatory fashion in an abusive way through misogyny. Sorry, that's just the price we got to pay. Really? That's what it is, right? So Black women who have saved this nation voted in the 90s for Obama, for Biden, right? And I'm not suggesting that if you voted for Biden, you were right, and if you voted for Trump, you're wrong. My point is, at this level, though, seeing what Trump was about, don't pretend like your vote for Trump didn't endorse white supremacist thought. I'm not calling you a racist, right? But I'm saying what you doing when you supporting a dude like that, knowing what he has articulated, your hands are not clean. And you have to be held accountable. The great Rabbi Abraham Yahshua Heschel said, not few are guilty, but all are responsible. Right? And so we have to be held to account for our implicit support and for our complicity in a system that has hurt and harmed so many. So Black women have been extraordinary, but the mules of the earth, as Zora Neale Hurston said, struggling hard to make America the best that it can be, struggling hard to make their families the best that they can be, making ends meet, victims of misogyny from within their own household by fellow Black men who are struggling for freedom too, making excuses and making defenses of those Black men, even as those Black men hamstring them. And then the dominant white supremacist society not wanting to acknowledge them, calling them names, demonizing them. Look at what happened to Michelle Obama. Look at the names she belongs in National Geographic, not in Vogue. Look at the white supremacist discourse. Look at the racist resistance to Black women. And so the inability to acknowledge women in general, Black women in particular, is a vicious consequence of toxic masculinity, of poisonous patriarchy, of mendacious misogyny, and of fatal femophobia, just scared of real women. Real woman shows up, you just get nervous. Oh my God. It's Miss Blaylock. She scares me. She's too intelligent. She might have some ideas that will threaten me. Miss Bowers is so articulate. I don't know what to, oh, geez, Jiminy. Oh! Wake up. Stand up. Understand the beauty and the power of our women who love and nurture us, who manifest care and concern for us, who should be treated with respect. And so that is a fundamental violation of an acknowledgement, in this case of Black women, women more generally, but in this case, Black women who have fought so hard to make this nation right, tried to save Doug Jones when he was running until that Tommy Tuberville then took over with his vicious white supremacist beliefs. Whack-a-doodle. Can we go to Misery? Can we go to Misery with Stephen King? You whack-a-doodle. The hell are you doing, homie? We need to bring that woman from Misery back and break some ankles up in here. Okay, I'm sorry. So the thing is, how whack is that, right? And yet these women voting have saved this democracy. Black women have saved this democracy. And then Amanda Gorman stands up, 22 years old, and reminds us of the epic sweep of the democratic vistas and the horizons of potential and possibility in a poem, in words that have been expressed, a speech impediment, but those words flow beautifully, hewn out of the majesty of a collective imagination that was given to her, that was bequeathed to her, that she inherited. And she stood there with a ring reminding her of Maya Angelou, given to her by Oprah Winfrey. The great cloud of Black female witnesses rose up to embrace that child. And so the respect, the admiration, and the love, and the gratitude should be there. But as with any strong woman, there's real fear. And so part of that is the misogynistic, patriarchal, sexist refusal to acknowledge the fundamental humanity and the essential worth of those women.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dyson.
Thank you, ma'am.
I wanted to ask Reverend Bowers if she would like to say any final words before we take it to the close.
I'm a preacher. You don't preach after preachers. So thank you. That's it. Mhm.
Thank you, Reverend Doctor. I appreciate that. Thank you all so much for this wonderful opportunity and this wonderful evening.
Thank you so much.
Hope you'll come again, and when you get in Tennessee, you'll remember us and all of
No
that.
doubt. I'll come hang out with y'all in Virginia. We can come hang out a little bit in person. That'd be beautiful.
That would be good. I was telling President Wells, I knew you indirectly when you were at Thankful in Johnson City, Tennessee.
Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy.
I didn't want to bring that up.
Yeah, you trying to cuss me now? No.
I know.
But I got put out for a good reason. I was trying to ordain 3 women as deacons now.
Exactly.
So I've been trying to live that talk since 1983.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I have utmost respect for you for that. I was but a young thing when you did that, but I thought, if he can do that, then I can do this.